As this court is aware, Mr. Castellaw is facing sentencing today for a count of second-degree murder, facing a minimum of 20 years up to life imprisonment. In the sentencing memorandum provided by defense counsel, she states that the fact that he pled to the charge should be a mitigator due to the fact that it saved the county money and it saved the victim Wyatt Reeves' family from having to go through a trial, which is true. But Mr. Castellaw also benefited from this plea agreement. He was charged with also use of a weapon, which carried another up to 50 years imprisonment, which was a mandatory consecutive sentence. And he also had another case dismissed, a third-degree assault that he was charged with that occurred on January 14th, 6 days prior to the murder of Wyatt Reeves. So he did benefit from the plea agreement, even if it may have had some mitigation effect on that. I've reviewed the sentencing memorandum. I've reviewed the very detailed and lengthy neuropsychological evaluation done by Dr. Sims, and I have a couple takeaways from both of those documents. Number one, it's clear Mr. Castellaw has a lot of issues to work on based upon that evaluation. But the other thing I noted from reviewing both of those documents was it's everybody else's fault. It's the parents' fault. Devante Castellaw is in the position he is today because of his parents' failure to properly raise him. The neglect, the abuse, the domestic violence, all of those things. The fact that his parents did not force him to go to school. The fact that the school did not do more to try to keep him in school. The fact that when he had mental health issues, the hospitals and doctors and mental health providers didn't force treatment on him. So while all of those things are somewhat mitigating because he has all of these issues, at some point in time they begin to become excuses. And Mr. Castellaw needs to take responsibility for his conduct at some point in time. I acknowledge that he's young, that he has mental health issues, that he did not have the best upbringing. I would agree that is probably true. But there are many other individuals in the world who also have terrible upbringings. They do not resort to stabbing somebody and killing them. So he does at some point in time need to take some responsibility. It does appear that prior to the murder of Wyatt, he was having some issues in downward spiraling. He was arrested for an assault on January 14th. Prior to that, and Ms. Chaluka talks about it in her sentencing memorandum, he had 3 to 4 suicide attempts in that 3-month period of time. He did the assault, and then on the 15th, the day after the assault at the Walmart that he was charged with that was ultimately dismissed, he presents with a cut on his arm, which was described as possibly another suicide attempt. And then 4 days later we have, or 3 days later after on the 16th we have, well, that happened on the 16th, so then on the window breaking was on the 16th, excuse me. 5 days later we have Wyatt's murder. So he was definitely had something going on, and he was on a downward spiral, and the state does acknowledge that. But the fact that the blame is on everybody else, his parents, they weren't good role models. The fact that his friends were bad peers that he just looked up to and followed because they were older. The fact that his friends' parents were bad, providing him alcohol and those types of things. All of that seems to be, while trying to explain why he's where he's at today, is also an excuse, as I said. Do I believe that Mr. Castellaw is remorseful? I do. He said in the pre-sentence that he feels bad for the victim's family. He doesn't say he feels bad for the victim. He does say he feels bad for the victim's family. And he feels bad for putting his own family through this. But he doesn't really express remorse for the death of Wyatt Reeves. And the fact that he seems to diminish or minimize his part of the crime is concerning to the state. In his statement that he provided to the in the pre-sentence report, he infers that he wasn't the one who stabbed Wyatt. He talks about another individual present who struck Mr. Reed with an object in his hand. And following that, he states that he did 4 to 5 overhand strikes on Wyatt. And he says it in the statement, he says, and this is what the video shows, but that's not what the video shows. The video shows clearly that he does 3 overhand strikes with a knife in his hand. So the fact that he's still not owning responsibility for his part in this is very concerning to the state of Nebraska. And the pre-sentence, in the pre-sentence report, it says he's in the contemplative state of change, and it's for that reason, because he's minimizing his participation in the death of Wyatt Reed. And that is a concern to the state. In the pre-sentence investigation report, Mr. Castellaw is high risk in the areas of education and employment, leisure and recreation, drugs and alcohol, and antisocial pattern, and he's in very high risk for companions. In the substance abuse questionnaire testing that was done in the pre-sentence, he's medium risk for drugs, maximum risk for alcohol, violence, antisocial, aggressiveness, and problem risk for stress coping. And his level of service case management is at the high risk and to reoffend. So that clearly Mr. Castellaw has some things to work on. And according to the memorandum, sentencing memorandum, and the document that was submitted as part of the pre-sentence from the jail, he's done well in jail. He's completed several online courses, and there are certificates in the pre-sentence that list all of those out, that cover all of those that he's done. And honestly, it's probably the first time he's had any sort of a structured environment where he's required to follow the rules, and he seems to be doing well with that. As I said, there's many things that he needs to work on: drug use, alcohol use, mental health treatment, violence, and those types of things. And he can get all of that treatment in the Nebraska Department of Corrections. One of the things that defense counsel wrote in her memorandum, which the state wholeheartedly agrees with, is this is a sad, sad case. Defendant said at some point in time, I don't remember if it was to the probation officer or to the Dr. Sims, but he said, I don't know why, we just didn't let the police handle this. And that's the question of the day. We wouldn't be here if they had done that. But unfortunately, he took the matters into his own hands. Him and the others were after revenge, they're after retaliation, and Wyatt Reed was the subject or the victim of that retaliation. And that's what brings us here today. Contrary to what I perceive as inferences as to Wyatt Reed's upbringing and things that was in the sentencing memorandum, I think there's no question that Wyatt was loved by his family and friends. There were several victim impact statements that were provided to the pre-sentence investigation report from his father, from his little brothers, from a stepmom, from his mother. And all of them expressed what a wonderful kid they thought Wyatt was, and how their lives are not whole anymore because of that. Wyatt's mother writes, as a mother, knowing my child's last moments were filled with fear and pain is something that will haunt me forever. One of the things that I have learned throughout my career is one of the most painful things victims of a loved one who's been killed go through is that empty chair at the table. She talks about that in her pre-sentence or her victim impact statement too. It's a reminder every day when you sit down at the dinner table, that person's not there anymore, and that's something that they live with on a day in, day out basis. In the sentencing memorandum, defense counsel talks about rehabilitation, and that is certainly one of the things that is sought in cases such as this. And we agree that there needs to be some rehabilitation of Devante Castellaw. The state does not believe he needs to be locked up forever with the key thrown away. We believe that there is hope for Devante Castellaw, that he can be rehabilitated. He has shown some progress in jail, and we feel that if he is sentenced to the Department of Corrections for a period of time, he will be able to take advantage of all of those treatment options that are available in the Department of Corrections, and hopefully he can become a productive person in society at some point in time in the future, and be released and live his life in a law-abiding manner. I want to talk for a minute about the defense counsel's memorandum when they're talking about recommendations for what the sentence should be. She writes that she believes, as the court knows, there needs to be an indeterminate sentence imposed in this case. The low number should be a low number to give Devante Castellaw the hope of someday getting out while he's still young and living his life as a productive citizen. But imposing a high number in case he cannot conform to the rules in the prison and continues to have problems, and that would be for protection of society. And that makes sense to the state of Nebraska, but the state does not agree with the 20 years of the low number. That's the minimum available in this case, and we do not believe that that would seek justice for this case and would appreciate the seriousness of the offense. Defense counsel talks about, and I don't know if I'm going to say this name right, she talks about another case that was out of Scottsbluff County where a juvenile was sentenced to prison for second-degree murder, state v. Castellaw or something to that effect. And she does some comparisons and distinguishing between that case and this case, and how in that case the defendant was not remorseful, made statements that sounded like he would continue to be basically a criminal, a violent criminal, and for that reason the court imposed a minimum sentence in that of 60 years, maximum of life. And distinguishes that case from this one, where we don't have Devante Castellaw bragging about the murder. We don't have him acting like he's going to further do criminal activities. And I would agree that in the pre-sentence report, the probation officer says he doesn't think that Devante would do something like this again. We don't know that, but that's what the thought process is, that he's not going to continue down this path that he's been on. And for that reason, the distinguishment, she believes that 20 years is an appropriate number on the bottom number. And the state does not agree with that. Again, I think that would appreciate the seriousness of the offense. If you look at that video, this was a violent attack on Wyatt Reed, and then he was just left to die. The state believes that somewhere in the middle between the Castellaw of 60 years and the next recommendation of 20 would be appropriate. Bottom number possibly 40 to the top number, whatever the court deems as appropriate. But the state feels that would be a more reasonable sentence to impose in this case based upon all the facts and circumstances of this case. That would give him time to fully rehabilitate, still be released, and be a productive citizen. And it would also be justice for Wyatt, who is someone who will never be able to be a productive citizen because he's no longer with us. And for those reasons, the state is recommending a sentence at the bottom number of at least 40 years.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Ms. Shaluka, comments?